Welcome back, YouTube family, to the This Baker Life podcast. And this week, we are talking about the biggest fears of small business owners and entrepreneurs. That's right. We're getting into the nitty gritty. Some of the things that are silly, some of the things that are big, some of them that are legit. Let's talk biggest fears in entrepreneurship right now. This Baker Life. Let's go. All right, welcome to this week's episode of This Baker Life. Thanks for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Please hit the like button as well and comment on anything that's been a big fear for you. That's today's topic. If you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner, I know you've been through these fears before. We're going to talk about the top 7 that we find common, that I found common even when I started my business. And we can talk about this on the comments. We don't have to end the conversation by just watching this video. So let's talk all about it. Throughout this episode, I'm going to give you some inspirational quotes too. They'll just pop up on the screen, just kind of an idea around how to deal with each of these 7 topics. And we'll talk through them while the quotes are on the screen. So if you see a quote pop up, it's not unplanned. It's exactly what I expected to happen on this episode. Let's do this right now and let's get into it. How many of you as entrepreneurs have really experienced fear? You know, one of the most exciting things you can do in entrepreneurship is just do it. Just start that business. That's an exciting thing, but it comes with a lot of anxiety. It comes with a lot of fear, especially if you're bootstrapping it, because if you don't have a financier, or you haven't raised funds for it, or you haven't done anything but used your own savings, it's tough to really know where it's going to go. And it's tough to know if you've got the idea that all that savings is going to go into that will make it work for you and your family. For me, my story is this. I worked for a company that was bought out. And because they were bought out, my region and myself in general, because I was a salesperson for the region, got consolidated into larger regions. And out of that, I ended up getting laid off myself. And there was not a lot of tenure there. I was only there about 3 years. So the severance was not extensive. That being said, I took a huge risk, and we're going to talk about the fear of the risk as well as one of these points here today. But I took a huge risk in starting what is now BHB TV, in that that's all I had to use. That was it. I mean, there wasn't a ton of savings there. I was a divorced dad. I was not in a position financially to say that I even had savings for retirement or other things. So to do this was a huge risk, probably the biggest risk you could possibly take. In fact, if I had talked to a financial advisor about it, I'm pretty sure they would have told me you're in no position to be starting a business. But I did it anyway, and I did it and took the risk. And here we are today with successful BHB TV, recognized across North America as one of the top learning platforms for mortgage professionals. And so how did we do it? You know, how did we get through these fears? Because there was a lot. You know, this was before the time where I'd brought on a business partner. This was before the time of really anything. This is a time where I didn't know what was going to happen. But, you know, getting laid off was in itself its own anxiety-inducing experience. I'd never been laid off before, never been fired before, never went through that before, and didn't want to go through it again. So for me, it was about starting a business and never having to lay myself off. What I truly didn't know and did not discover until I started was that you're tactically laying yourself off every week. I mean, right? Am I wrong? Put it in the comments if I'm wrong, entrepreneurs. But do you remember this when you first started? You're basically laying yourself off every week. There's no if there's a down period, you're not paying yourself. You're investing any money that you have coming in back into the business. And so you're essentially furloughed, you're essentially laid off. And so instead of stopping the layoffs, I actually lay myself off, not so much anymore, but definitely at that time laid myself off on the regular, as the youth say. So there's that, and you have to think about that. You know, there is that risk that comes along with starting your own business, especially if you don't have investors, especially if you're bootstrapping it. So that creates fear out of other fears. And I think there's a top 7, as I said, that you really experience as a new business owner, as a small business owner, even as the business grows. Okay. So I don't want this to be about talking about fear and you're going to fall down a pit and your business is going to fail. It's not. If you stick with it, I'm living proof that it's going to be successful. It's going to be successful. There's different strategies to make it that way. And throughout this podcast and these episodes, we will talk about it, because I'm not about hiding what works. I think it's very important that we all share what works so that we can all have quicker success in the long run. So, but what we will talk about is the fears, because we do have to learn how to manage them. We do have to learn about how to get over some of these fears. And the first one is for failing. I mean, one of the things that I got into when I got into the mortgage business, more so not when I was in my employment side of the mortgage business, but as I started this business, it was in mortgage education. It was how do you teach mortgage brokers and other mortgage agents and loan officers and loan originators to develop their own business, and basically teaching entrepreneurs how to do what I'm doing in their own business. How am I going to do that? And so many people told me I can't. So many people told me that people have come and gone in the mortgage industry trying to do this, right? And the way that the structure works in my industry is that if you become a mortgage professional, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in Canada, it doesn't matter. You become yourself as an independent business, right? You're working on commission, essentially. You get a license from wherever the licensing authority is near you, and then you're left on your own to actually develop the business. The license will teach you about what to do with mortgages and loans, but it will not help you develop a business. And there's some support features in and around the industry and certain support people that are wonderful at this, that have written books and have done very famous podcasts and things like that can help you. But there was really no central location for any of this. And so what we were trying to do was develop that. But we kept getting told, or I kept getting told at that time, I say now because my business partner Dave and I face this, but at the time, it was me getting told that this is not going to work. That people have tried this before. Mortgage brokers don't care about their education. They just care about loans in and out the door. All of this stuff. All of a sudden, that created a huge fear of failure and a big concern for me. But one of the things that I always brought myself back to was the fact that I started this endeavor because when I was a sales manager, a BDM, as they call them in Canada, for a lender, one of the things that I noticed was I was always having to teach how to position a product, teach how to get clients, even in some cases, with struggling new agents and new loan professionals. And so it was like, wait a minute, this is something that your supportive network should be doing. This is something that, maybe your head broker or your manager, if that's the case, should be doing in wherever you are. So why am I doing it as the lender representative? And so what I realized was there isn't really anybody that's doing that. Even the person that runs the operation is doing their own business. They don't have time for this. So I knew there was a need. I knew there was a need, but how are we going to make it easy? How are we going to make it easy? And I won't go through the whole story. I'll go through it in another episode of this podcast. We'll stick to the fears, but the big fear was failing. But I got over that by knowing that I did identify a need. So let me ask you right now, if you're feeling the fear of failure, sit where you are right now and ask yourself, how did you identify the need for your business? How did you identify it? Okay. Because if you did a good job of identifying the need of the business, then that's there already. That need is there, and you are not going to fail. You will find a way to make that business successful because you knew there was a need there. You found the need, and you're now filling that hole in your industry. That's one of the great ways to get over the fear of failure, is to look back on what made you start this in the first place, and what hole are you filling in the industry that you're starting this business in. The next thing is the fear of change. Boy, oh boy, was this something I didn't expect. The change that comes from being in an employment relationship and having a boss and having a salary and having benefits and having bonuses and all of this stuff, to going from that to not having any of that. Nobody's supervising you, and that's a great thing. It's fun. It's awesome if you can do that for yourself and you can stay motivated. But it can be tough. It can be really tough. And it can be really tough because the change is so drastic. Nobody's telling you to come into work at 9. Nobody's telling you to take your lunch at noon. Nobody's telling you to submit reports or due dates or anything like that. But you also don't have a regular paycheck. You also don't have benefits. You also don't. So there's this piling of change that happens right out of the gate as soon as you started your small business. And if you're watching this as already a small business owner, you already know this. So how do you understand that change is going to happen? Because the reality is change is unavoidable. But what I want to tell you is that the change is going to get better too. A lot of times the drastic change at the beginning is something that you might see as a negative. And really that's not going to be the case in the long run. What you have to understand is that change, how that change happened that fast is how the next change is going to happen at that same speed, right? So just as fast as you felt the negatives, no more salary, no more control, no more benefits, things like that, just as fast as you felt that change, there's going to be more change. So you can't fear change because some of it's good. Some of it is what you wanted, right? That independence you wanted. Maybe the work-life balance isn't there yet because you're still in the early days, but it comes when you can start to delegate and you can start to hire and you can start to make changes to your business that allow you to take more work-life balance. You can, and I highly recommend that you do, but that's also a big change. You can't fear that change. So I think what you have to do is assess the circumstances in front of you, figure out what the change is that's happening, and decide whether taking that next step is worth the risk that's involved. So what I'm saying is if you've gotten this far and you've already at the spot of no salary, no benefits, whatever, and you're worried about that change, what is the next step in your business? What is the next step you're going to take? And is it worth the risk of taking that step to see what the next change will be? Because the fact of the matter is you're already in change. So you got to just assess the next risk and whether that change is going to be acceptable to you as well. And it probably will be. I'll just give you kind of a spoiler alert. It probably will be because you're building, right? You're building something and you need to continue to build something. But with that, there's risk. And so our very third, is very third even a thing? I don't think so. Our third biggest fear of being an entrepreneur and starting your own business is the fear of taking a risk. You know, this is probably the biggest fear, and yet it's the most necessary. It's the most necessary. You have to fear risk, but you also have to take those risks. Now, it depends. I mean, I'm not telling you to jump off a bridge or anything and try it without a parachute and just a big bulky windbreaker. Some kind of risk like that. No, we're talking about risks you've already probably taken by starting your business, or even just considering starting your business as a risk because you're trying to get your family on board. You're trying to get everybody else on board around you that this new idea, this hole you're filling is the next big thing. Business owners have to take risks to elevate their companies to the next level. But you can get to a point where it's not simple, but it is a calculated risk. Right? Risks that are well calculated and strategically planned can absolutely pay off for you. They can absolutely pay off for you. They can actually lead to extraordinary success. One of the risks we took at BHB TV was, first of all, changing the name to BHB TV. We were Mortgage Magnates. People were spelling it magnets, all this other stuff. Our actual platform was called MM for Mortgage Magnates University, and it was well used, and people were subscribing, but not to the level we wanted. We knew we had to take a risk. I brought Dave on. Dave's been awesome. We've got a whole new platform now that we developed that represents Netflix. I mean, basically, it's the same kind of platform, a streaming platform, right? An OTT platform is what they formally call it. And we made it free to the industry. We took a huge calculated risk by removing the membership fee and instead charging for channels. We sell industry partners channels, lenders, accountants, lawyers, appraisers. They can all have channels on BHB TV to help reach the mortgage industry and promote their products and services to our audience. Well, two things came out of that giant calculated risk. One, nobody believed us at first that we were going to keep it free. Nobody. Everybody was like, this is it. This is just going to be a trial. There, and then all of a sudden they're going to start charging. We are now 3 years into BHP TV, almost still free, by the way, for the entire industry. And because of our partners have been amazing. We have so much support from lenders, from appraisers, from lawyers, from everybody who's using it and bought channels that that allows us to continue to offer education, such needed education for this industry for free. That was a calculated risk. We didn't just make it free. It seemed like we did on the outside to marketing people or to people that were coming in as members. They thought this is great. It's going free. It's an even better platform. It's available on iOS and Android. We did apps. So we made apps. It's on all smart TVs. So just like you pull up Netflix, you've got BHB TV right there too. If you want to type it in right now to test it out, you'll see it's there. It was such a scary risk, but it was a calculated risk. We knew we had a solution for the revenue we were losing on the memberships to replace it in a much greater way than we even were getting with those memberships. And sure as heck, we are there now. I mean, that is huge for us. Huge for us was, if you talk about taking extraordinary success out of risks that are well calculated, that was one of them. So you can do it, but it does take you sitting back and saying, okay, I'm afraid of this risk, but maybe I'm afraid of the risk only because it's not well calculated. Right. And I think that's what we did. It was okay, this risk of going free is absolutely a business killer if we do it wrong. But instead, what we did was we sat down and we took apart the risk and said, where can we find the revenue that will keep us alive and get the viewership to grow exponentially because it's free? And we got both. And it was because of that well-calculated risk. Now we have, over 9,000 viewers in Canada. We've got over 50,000 viewers in the United States that use us regularly as part of the industry. So this is where we really took that calculated risk. And that's why we're spending so much time right now on fear of taking risks. It's only number 3, but I promise I won't spend a ton of time on the rest of them. This one was a big one because if you can do it calculated, if you can calculate the risk, it's worth taking. It's absolutely worth taking. And the fear can be reduced as well. I want to just kind of say how uncertainty ties into that. Number 4 is the fear of uncertainty. I think you can make things more certain by planning them out, by calculating them, like we said with the risks. It's the same thing. The uncertainty kind of goes away when you do a proper calculation of what you're doing next. Okay. And it doesn't, I say calculation, but it's not really math. It's really what your strategy is to take the plan to the next level. Right? Take that plan to the next level. What is going to be next? And if you've got it figured out and you can pull it apart and you can make it a plan, a true plan, you'll be able to hit your objectives. You'll be able to conduct the research you need to reduce the uncertainty. For example, when we talk about releasing channels as our strategy, we didn't just think lenders would buy it. We didn't just know lenders would buy in and want to have their own content channels on BHB TV. It was a risk that we calculated and then researched. We talked to them, right? And is this something that you would do? Is this something that you would see beneficial? It turns out it's so much cheaper than a trade show and having a trade show booth. In fact, one of them called us a 24/7 trade show. That came out of nothing we did. That came out of our clients. So what we really understood here was we didn't even understand our own success that was going to come from offering channels because we hadn't even dove as deep as we needed to on it to discover that this was actually a cheaper than a trade show way to be in front of mortgage professionals 24/7. That came from a client. But it came from a client because we asked. And so you can really reduce the uncertainty and the fear of uncertainty by calculating and taking risks that are calculated so that you feel better about taking that next risk. The fear about not being good enough. I want you to take a look at the last episode of this podcast. It did really well. Thank you to the 4,000 or 5,000 viewers that watched it. Lots of likes, everything like that. And a couple of personal messages sent to me that it was really helpful. It was on the fear of, not really the fear of not being good enough, but I guess it is. It was the imposter syndrome, right? And the imposter syndrome you might feel, but this happens not just as a business, a new business. This happens as an employee. This happens as a new career. But what I think you really have to understand is that's a huge fear in the entrepreneurship world too, is that you're not good enough. Self-doubt. Can I run a business? Number one is a huge fear. Can I convince others that this business is worth it to them? Can I show enough experience that they can trust my business? You know, one of the things that I was lucky to have was experience within the insurance industry and creating educational programs. So if you looked at my LinkedIn, if you looked at my resume, you would see that I had experience creating some of the things that BHB TV does. Ideally, you get into something that you do well, that you have a passion for. I was educated in radio and television broadcasting, which is why I'm doing this now and have no issue with doing it. It's doing things that you love. But if you do get into something completely different, remember the research side of things. Remember it kind of goes back to that last two fears, right? Calculate, calculate, calculate. Show you have the experience. Show you are driving the bus, and you will be able to get clients. You will, absolutely. You are good enough because you're spending more time, even if it's brand new to you, you're spending more time researching it than anyone else is. Because it's your business, it's your lifestyle, it's your livelihood. You're spending more time doing that than anyone else is. So you don't need to fear whether you're good enough because you're already better than most. Okay. So but again, it's all about the research and the calculated risks and the time you take to put into your business and knowing it well, front and back. What is it that you're going to be able to do to make these changes and to reduce this fear? The next one is the fear of letting others down. And I think this is probably the second biggest, because it must be, right? If you're watching this, you can hit like right now, because I'm sure this is something that you've all gone through. What am I going to do if this doesn't work with my family? Where are we going to live? How are we going to eat? What's going to happen? This is a big fear. This is a big one. Fear of letting others down. If you don't create your life the way you want it, if you don't go after what you love, if you don't you're just letting yourself down. So if you get into a career you don't love, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, if you get into something that just doesn't, create a passion or pull your passions out, you are letting yourself down, and you're already making this fear true before you even let your family down, before you even let anyone else down. So part of what you're doing, part of why you're watching this now, is to make yourself better, right? Then you're doing it right, because you're not going to let yourself down, because you're doing the research you need to do. You're doing the research that matters to your business and that makes it so that you can do your passion. And once you've done that, you're not going to let anyone else down, because you love it. And when people see you love it and people see you're passionate about it, they will buy. They will buy from you because they understand you're going to support what they need because of how much you love what you do. You would never let them down, because you don't want to let yourself down or anyone else. So that fear, you first have to make sure. Don't let yourself down first. Do something you love. Do a passion. Okay? And then reassure your family, reassure the people around you, reassure those people you're afraid to let down that you got this and you know what you're doing, because you've put those calculations into all the risks. You've done the research. You've watched podcasts like this. You've made yourself better, and you're ready. You're ready to go do something you love and are passionate about. The very last one is success-related fear. And success-related fear is fear of actually doing it right. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get it right and you're a success? How do you keep it? How do you keep that success? How do you make sure people resubscribe? One of our biggest fears when we first started was, okay, people are going to try out the channels. And while they try out the channels, we're going to be growing our audience. What if we can't grow the audience enough? And we have tons of success in the first year with getting channels because the idea is great, but then we don't get enough of an audience to support renewing those channels the next year. because our clients renew them from year to year. We allow them to. We really believe in the brokers helping brokers experience to the point where we will let them out. There's no 3-year contracts. And so if they needed to leave, they could. Well, the only reason anybody's left us so far with their channels is because they're struggling as a business themselves and don't have the budget for it. Not because of anything that we did or anything that our viewers did. So that fear was put aside for us, this fear of success. But boy, oh boy, was it ever there. Boy, oh boy, did we feel it. Like once we're a success, what if we can't sustain it? And again, the big thing is trusting your ability to build your own business, your ability to delegate, and your ability to grow the business without just you doing it. One of the ways to get over the success-related fear is to make sure you can delegate. When I brought Dave in, it was, he was super interested, super passionate about this business. And that was a big winner for me because he had the same passions I did. So it made it easy to delegate half the business roles to him, right? And as we grow, we hire. And we do that because we need to make sure we sustain the success. But that's what you have to do. You need to have annual plans, quarterly plans, semi-annual plans, even down to the monthly plans about everything in your business, from how you're going to allocate revenue, how you're going to pay yourself, how you're going to pay the bills, how you're going to pay the government, how you're going to do all these different things and sustain the success of the platform or business that you're running itself. And oftentimes, as you get successful and you grow, that can't just be you anymore. It has to be a set of passionate people. So success-related fear can be, again, managed through planning, managed through delegation, and managed through creating a passion for what you do with everyone who works with you. Strong leadership. If you don't find you're finding that passion, take some leadership courses on how you can pull that passion out of your people. There's tons of them. Some of them are free. So you can go on and you can look at those things and you can say, pulling out the passion. Okay. That's it. Those are the big 7 fears from entrepreneurship. And I hope I've given you ways to overcome them and ways to change the way you approach your brand new business. Please like and subscribe to this, but also please keep watching these episodes. Next, we've got a great guest. Harry Muir is joining us from Posse. He's going to talk about the craziness of youth sport, the craziness in youth sport, and how Purpose of Sport initiative changes what sport and competitive sport in particular really means out there. And Harry was with the Toronto Blue Jays for a time, so he knows what he's talking about. He's been a coach for many, many years, and he is even the GM of a brand new inter-county baseball league team in Chatham, Ontario. So there's so much that Harry brings to this, but he's also one of the co-founders of it, and we're going to learn about the Posse experience next week. So if you're a sports coach or you're even just a leader, speaking of leadership, and want to hear what Harry has to say, join us next week. Join us and see, I can talk. Join us next week on this Baker Life podcast. And we welcome Harry Muir and the Posse experience for sport. We'll talk about that next week. Thanks for joining us this week. Get over those fears. Go start working on them now. And we'll see you on the next episode.